Well, for some insight into Peru's election, we can bring in Tiziano Breda, a senior analyst of Latin America and the Caribbean at Global Conflict and Protest Monitor ACLED. Good morning, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Good morning, Alison. Thanks to you for the invitation.
Perhaps the biggest overarching issue is Peru's political instability in this election. Do you think that it's likely to get resolved with this vote?
Well, there's certainly one novelty in this election, which is the reintroduction of a bicameral system. So there's not just a Senate, but there's sort of a House of Deputies that has been reintroduced after 30 years. And that certainly stems or limits the possibility or the ease with which the Congress has been able to depose presidents and reinstate new ones over the past few years that has contributed so much to the political instability we were referring to. Of course, neither of the candidates has a strong majority in Congress, so it makes it also more in either chamber. So it makes it even more difficult for either of them to, regardless who will be the winner, to advance in any legislative sort of reforms that they would want to push for.
Yeah, the two candidates also seem quite polarized. Can you sort of walk us through the main differences between them? They also both have quite a lot of political baggage.
Yeah, of course. I mean, on one hand, you have Keiko Fujimori, a well-known sort of leader, daughter of former dictator Alberto Fujimori, certainly coming from the center-right, with a hardline approach towards crime, sort of a more liberal agenda in terms of the state's participation in the economy, and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, there's Pedro Sanchez, the Delphin of Pedro Castillo, former president, who also was disgraced because he attempted a self-coup, basically, and attempted to rule by decree, and was impeached and jailed for that reason. That has a more progressive left-wing view of the society, so sort of subsidies, state participation in public services, and a more sort of nuanced, holistic approach to security that sort of foresees police reform, strengthening investigative bodies. So yeah, a softer version, if you want, of ideas to tackle crime.
Yeah, I want to talk more about crime because that really has been the main issue for Peruvians, aside from just the instability. Why is crime so high in Peru?
Well, it's a mix of various reasons, and it's something that's been cooking for years. You have a country that has historically been one of the main producers of the coca leaf, following, of course, Colombia, which is the main one. That's a country that has rich resources in the soil. It's traditionally been a mining country, but in the last few years, there's been a growing appeal of gold as a resource. And that has attracted a lot of interest from not only legal mining companies, but also illegal armed groups from neighboring Ecuador, Colombia, and also Peruvian armed groups. And that's spread towards the Peruvian Amazon, and that's created a lot of problem there. And of course, you also have the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the livelihoods of many Peruvians. The spread of extortion as a practice. Also, in a way, some trace it back to the migration waves that Peru has met with the arrival of a lot of Venezuelans, so also external gangs such as the Tren de Aragua. And on the other hand, you have a legislature that has not paid attention to this, or has even, in some cases, participated actively, has found allies in these groups to benefit from corruption, basically, and to get a slice of the cake. So you have this mix of lack of attention, not being ready for a phenomenon that probably was not so used to common in Peru, and an increasing appeal of the country for its resources towards this crime. So it's a perfect mix for disaster.
And there's been a bit of a right-wing wave sort of sweeping across South America in countries like Chile. What impact would each candidate's victory have on the politics of the region?
There's definitely an interest in seeing how this election goes, because it could be one of the many elections that we've been seeing in Latin America recently, in which a country shifts towards the right, which is something that certainly the Trump administration has made no secret of being inclined and wishing for. Even though in the case of the Peruvian election, there's not been an active meddling or support as it has been in Colombia with El Tigre, the candidate de la Espriella, or in other countries such as Honduras, Argentina, Chile, etc. Certainly, it would also mean a possible shift of a country in that, as a geopolitical relevance, because the US has expressed its interest in supporting Peru to take back or take away from China the concession of the Chancay port, which is a huge infrastructure that the Chinese have invested in. So it would also mean sort of for the US a possible nearing of a country towards its proper interest vis-a-vis the external competitors.
And the first round of this election was marred by disruptions, including delays to delivering ballots. It then took over a month to declare the winners. When might we expect the results of this second round? And then do you think that they will be accepted as legitimate?
Well, there's been some changes in the electoral authorities since the mess of the first round. So the hope, of course, is that there won't be those same delays in the delivery of ballot boxes or the delays in opening the polls and the polling stations. So certainly there's a hope that this will be different, of course, because there's also one election, essentially one vote towards one or the other candidate, whereas in the previous round you also had the legislative election in Congress, so it was much more complicated, if you want. But certainly the distrust that first round has created towards electoral authorities in an election that is so tight, because essentially Keiko Fujimori comes from with the upper end, but has always reached a certain ceiling, because of the antibodies that his father's legacy creates. And on the other hand, you have another candidate that may be sympathized by many, but also is associated with another president that whose presidency is not remembered well, which is that of Pedro Castillo, under which he served as a minister of tourism and trade. So it's an election that really will be tied to the probably many few votes of difference. And if that's the case, then distrust in the authorities, in the vote count, in the way the election has been carried out, can sort of risk creating sort of claims of frauds, of irregularities that could steer tensions ahead of the results.
All right. Well, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. We'll keep a close eye on those results. Tiziano Breda, thank you again so much for taking the time to speak with us today. That's Tiziano Breda, a senior analyst of Latin America and the Caribbean at Global Conflict and Protest Monitor, ACLED.